In this video, we'll try to understand how we can implement forms authentication in MVC application. So let's select MVC3 template and let's create a simple MVC sample application. Now currently I'm showing this demo using MVC3 template, but feel free to use MVC4 or MVC2 version. The steps are almost same, or I'll say the steps are still same. Because we have yet not started with MVC4, so I do not want to really jump to MVC4 and show this demo. So for now I'm going to use MVC3 template and we'll try to complete this practical. So let me just go and select this MVC3 template here, and let's go and create a very simple application called as MVC Forms authentication. Oops, that is one existing MVC Forms authentication sample must be. I'm so sorry. And let me go and create an empty web application here, an empty MVC web application, and we will select the view engine as ASPX. Okay, and let's click OK. Now before I start the demo, let me clarify the fundamental of forms authentication which we have applied for ASP.NET. The same thing we have to apply for MVC. So in other words, the framework of forms authentication is absolutely the same. Okay, so whatever we have read in ASP.NET forms authentication, the same thing we have to do here in MVC. Only thing over here is that you start thinking in terms of action, controllers and views. Okay, so in case you are new to forms authentication, what my suggestion would be to go to .NET fundamental section and look into authentication and authorization section, where we discuss how to implement forms authentication in ASP.NET pages. So what we'll do in this demo is we'll go and create a very simple controller called as the security controller, and the security controller will have an action called as login. Now when your application first runs, right, this action will be invoked, this login action will be invoked from the security controller. This login action will go further and invoke a view called as login view. This login view will have two text boxes, one for user ID and one for password. Now the end user will come in, he will put his user ID, he will put his password, and he will click on the submit button. This form will go and invoke the check user action from the security controller. So again, in the security controller we will have one more action called as check user. So the security controller will have two actions. One is a login action, which will actually go and invoke the login view, and second is a check user action, who will actually check if this user ID and password is valid or not. So if the user ID and password is valid, he will go and set the cookie, and he will go and invoke the home view. In case the user ID and password is not proper, he will redirect the controller's action to the login view. So he will go and display the login view. So what we'll do is, first let's go ahead and create the security controller. Let's go and put these two actions, that is login and check user, and then we will go ahead and create those two views. One is the login view and the home view. So let me just go to the controller here, right click, add new controller, and I will name this controller as security, and let me press OK. So that is my security controller created. Now what we'll do is, let's go inside the security controller and let's go and create an action called as login. So as soon as somebody comes and he hits this controller and he invokes this action login, we will go and return a view called as the login view. So I'm going to go and return here a view called as the login view. Now you don't need to give this word login here, because if you go and create a login view, it will just map the same name with the controller name, but I've just given this so that it's more readable. So now we have this action. Now let's go ahead and create a login view. So I'm going to go and right click here, go and create a view here called as a login view, and I will not use any master page for now, and let me just go and use the ASPX view engine, because I'm much more comfortable currently in using ASPX, and I'll just go and click on add. Now it is always advisable, or it's always a good practice to create strong type views. So in other words, this view which I have created, which is a general view, it would have been great if you can go and create a login class and attach that login class with this login.aspx over here and create a strongly typed view. But for now, our concentration is mainly on forms authentication. So what I've done is I've just gone ahead and I've created a simple ASPX view. In case you want to know how to go and create a strongly typed view, please go and refer the previous videos, the previous labs. You will see that one of the videos, where we have shown how to go and create a strongly typed view. So currently our focus is mainly on forms authentication, so I'm not getting into creation of strongly typed views. So in this screen, what we'll have is we'll have two text boxes and one submit button. So one text box will take the user ID and the second text box will take the password. So I'll just say here, enter username, right? So this is one text box. We can also go and use HTML from the toolbox. Okay, so that's much more easy to do. So I'm going to go and use HTML from the toolbox here. So one is I want a text box, right? Second is the second text box will have the password. So here's input type password, right? And we'll also need one submit button. So input type submit, right? And all of these guys, will be wrapped inside a form, right? So I'm going to have a form here. And always remember that you can always use the HTML helper classes. If you remember, in one of the previous videos we have shown how to use the HTML helper classes to create HTML controls like text boxes, buttons, etc. So you can always use the HTML helper classes, but for now, I don't want to go and make this demo complicated, by using HTML helper classes. So what I've done here is, for now, is I've just used simple HTML here, so that we can concentrate on the MVC Forms authentication demo. Okay, so let's go ahead and use some proper name here. So I'm going to go and name this as txt user ID. I'll also give a nice name here, but we'll just give the same name. The same name in the same way. This is txt password. Right. Now the next thing is, when somebody goes and clicks on this submit button over here, it should actually go and invoke an action called as check user, and it should actually make a post to that action. So we'll say here, when somebody goes and clicks on the submit button, please go and invoke the action check user. Okay, and second, ensure that you make a post to that action, right? So I've said here method equal to post. Now the next thing what we need to do is we need to go and create this action in the security controller here. So let's go here and create an action. I'm going to say here, this is a new action result called as check user, and in this check user we will do the forms authentication, right? Now the next thing what we need to do is we need to go and check if the entered user in this login.aspx exists in the database or not. But for now, we'll not go and write any kind of ADO.NET code or database code, to check if this user exists in the database or not. What we'll do is we'll just go and, hard code the username and passwords in the controller itself. Okay. So the first thing is we need to go and check if the entered username and passwords are proper or not. Okay. So in order to get the entered username and password from the UI, we'll say here if request.form. Now remember that in one of our videos we have shown that how you can avoid request.form and use strongly typed objects. Okay, so currently we don't have strongly typed objects, so I'm using the old request.form method. So I'll say here request.form. The first text box is txt user ID, so I'm going to go and say here okay, take the value from this form here, and does this value contains Shiv? Okay, and the password So that is the password text box name, and the password is, let's say, Shiv again. Okay. So if the end user puts Shiv and Shiv in username and password, he is a valid user, or else he is an invalid user, right? Now once the user has put a proper username and password, the next thing is we need to go and use the forms authentication class to set the cookie. Okay, so this, by using the forms authentication class, we are saying that the user is proper, and we are setting the cookie so that next time when the end user comes back again in write, he comes and hits some other action, we don't need to revalidate him. Okay, and once this cookie is set, the next thing is what we'll do is we'll go ahead and redirect to about view page, and if the end user is not proper, we need to redirect him back to the login view. Now in order to use the forms authentication class, we need to go and import system.web.security, because at the end of the day, forms authentication belongs to ASP.NET framework. It comes from the ASP.NET framework, right? So we need to ensure that we have imported this security namespace here, and the next step is we can now go and call the forms authentication class, and we can say please set the cookie to whatever username that is typed in this text box here, and we'll just say please go and save this cookie. Okay, so what happens now is once you have set this cookie here, right, if you go and hit some other action, for example, now let's say that I had an action here called as let's say view customer, right, I don't need to go and revalidate again and again, because once this cookie is set, right, this cookie is like a indicator saying that this user has already been validated, and you don't need to validate him again and again. Okay, and once this is done, the next thing is we would like to go and invoke the view here, that is the about view. Okay, and in case the user is not proper, we would like him to go back to the login view. Right. So that looks good. So let me just go and build this application here so that we don't have any kind of errors, and there are no errors. That's good. And currently we don't have this view also, the about view. So let's first quickly go and create this view here, about. We'll not use any kind of master page for now. So this is the about page. Okay, great. And also let me go and create an action here, action result, which can invoke the about view directly. So let me just go and create an action here. So you can see that I've created a very simple action here called as about. So what this about does is it actually goes and invokes the about view. So what we'll do is, why I have created this about action here is so that we can check, if our forms authentication is working or not. So in other words, if I directly try to go and invoke this about view here, it should not allow me to see the about page. Okay, so that's why I've created, this action for testing purpose. Now the next thing is we need to go and decorate the appropriate actions, the actions which we want to be secured, by using the authorize attribute. So for now, the first thing what I would like to ensure is that this about action cannot be invoked by any anonymous user. So I would like to go and decorate this action by using the authorize attribute. So that's the first thing. Now the other two actions, that is login and check user, I do not want to decorate them with the authorize attribute. Why? Because these are the actions which can be invoked by anonymous user. These are the actions from which they can put the username and password, right? So I won't be decorating the login and the check user by authorize attribute, because I want that these actions to be accessed by the anonymous user. They should be able to put their username and password, and all the validation actually takes place in these actions. So these two actions I'm going to leave it empty for now. Now the final and the famous step, what we need to do is we need to go to the web config file and set the authentication tag to forms, right? So let me go to the web config file. So let me just go and open the web config file here, and let me go to the authentication attribute. It's already there, you can see, and currently it is set to forms, so that is good. The only thing is that as soon as the form runs, right, I would like that he should first go and invoke the login action which belongs to the security controller, right? So I'm going to go here and say that please ensure that the time you start the login URL is security/login. So now we are all set. So let's do a control F5. Let's run our application. So the first thing what we'll do is we will go and invoke the login action from the security controller, right? So I'm going to go here and say here security/login. So that's our our forms, our form page, from where you can go and enter the username and password. So if I put any kind of wrong username and password and if I press submit, you can see that how the check user action is redirecting back to the login page, right? And now if I put a proper username and password, so if you remember right, in our controller we had hard coded the username and password, right? So now if I go and put a proper username and password, you can see that he is redirecting to the about page. And just to quickly check, if you try to go and straightforward invoke the action about us, it will not work. So in other words, let's say if I close this browser and if I start again, and let's say that we have some smart users who try to do something like this about us. Now what will happen here is the forms authentication will come into action, and he will ensure that this user who is not validated redirects to this page or to this action, that is security login, right? So if any smart user tries to directly go and access the about us action, and if you also remember the about us action, we had decorated the about us action with the authorize attribute, right? So if somebody goes and does this, looks like there's a problem there. Oh, the action name is about and not about us. So let us go and delete this. Let's press enter. Now you can see that he is again going back to the to the login form, because this is an unauthorized user, and it is not allowing the unauthorized user to view the about page, right? So this indicates that our forms authentication is working properly. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. In this video we were trying to understand how we can implement forms authentication in MVC application. Thank you so much.